next 25 years will not be the same, and it will look quite different from our previous 25 years and previous maybe 30, 40 years. The world has been on a particular system, and I'll talk about this, and on the technology industry, all of this. And it's not just the pandemic. And there's going to be a lot of changes you will see, and it's worth understanding these themes, what is changing. And those of us, tasked with running this technology business, I think we have to have some level of convictions. I talked about philosophy. Where is the world heading? Where are these technologies heading? Where should we invest? And those are critical questions. So it's important to understand that. And there are broadly 4 themes in this presentation, and I will just quickly go over them just to sort of give you the signposts. And there is first, I'm going to call it delayering the tech stack. I'll go into this in detail, but you have a lot of layers in technology right now, and these layers are getting crunched. And then the second one, it's very topical. We see extreme financial bubbles and inequality and social unrest. And we are seeing this, we've seen the theme of last several years, and particularly last year, we saw a lot of that. And then there is along with it, this has led to a call for more self-reliance, regional economies, and a geopolitical, all over the world, move towards localism. And this is true in the US, this is true in India, 2 countries I'm most familiar with, but it's also true everywhere else. And you have trends like Brexit, all of that point to this same thing. And then this fourth is really, how do we build a necessarily distributed company? This was true before the pandemic. I'll talk about this. But post-pandemic world, how do we build a company like this with the technologies and the culture to enable us to be productive? And how do we address the problems identified in the 2 and 3? The problems of financial bubbles and problems of the social inequality leading to more localism. And how do we play with those trends? Apple comes to mind, and it's the company with a technology vision and a patient execution. For example, their operating system had its beginning in 1991 in Next. Okay, when Steve Jobs was running Next. So it's by now it's 30 years. And the same with their semiconductors, and I'll talk about this shortly. They acquired a company called Palo Alto Semi maybe 15, 16 years ago, I forget. And that has led to what is now the M1 chip, which is, this is not an ordinary chip. No. In fact, it is now presenting a huge challenge to Intel and a challenge to other players in the ecosystem. For Microsoft, which relies on Intel for its core desktop OS. And it challenges Amazon, all of them, because you got to come up with solutions now. And this was possible only because Apple has been investing patiently in this area for nearly 20 years. And when Apple was on these problems way before anybody saw that these would be problems they need to tackle. For example, Microsoft has not been designing chips. Of course, now in the last 5 years, all of them have now semiconductor divisions, Microsoft and Google and Amazon, and I believe even Facebook, all of them. So, and we have one too, actually, in Zoho. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So that is now the game now. So you have to have the full stack. And that leads to we are back to the vertically integrated company. And the reason is fundamentally technological. We cannot, these layers, introduce each. When you layer and layer and layer technology, there's a lot of inefficiencies. When you integrate these, you get a lot of efficiencies. And I know this because I personally work on some of these technologies at the bottom, programming languages in particular. For example, there is a lot of payoff in designing your language and your processor CPU together. And nobody has done that before. Apple is actually comes closest to the M1 chip and the Swift language, all of that. But there is a lot of payoff there. So you will see, this is why you will see Microsoft and Google all which all have programming language division, compilers, all that, also designing chips. Because it's going to be important to integrate all these, and then the OS on top, and then the apps. All these, lot of the layers are going to get crunched together. The pendulum is now swinging back. There is now a move towards more resilience, and you saw President Biden's executive order. So this is the reality everywhere. This is same thing is true in India. You may have heard of something called Atmanirbhar Bharat. That's a Hindi term for Atmanirbhar is for self-reliance. Self-reliance India. That's actually the theme now, economic theme in India. So everywhere this is true. It's true in America. It's true in India. This is the trend we have to take into account in our how we plan our business, our technologies, all that in the next 25 years. So this is the reality, and basically it comes down to a lot more local production, balancing local consumption. That's really what it amounts to. It's stripped of all the jargon. This is really what it amounts to. And so first come to the tools part, because that's an easy one. I'll dispense with it. They are becoming better, will become much better. And you can see from this event itself, it's hosted on our own Zoho backstage and powered by Zoho Show, all of these. And I have been working remotely in creating this presentation, and we have had real-time editing going on up all the way until like 20 minutes ago. There were some small changes being made, pictures added, all of that. So that, no, it's all online, so I just get to see it. And the remote work tools will get much better, even better. There's going to be a lot more intelligence applied to it, AI, all of this. And so that we can virtually simulate being together for work. And so that you will see in the next few years. That's a major thing, and that's obvious, and all the companies are working on it. We are on it. Zoho is on it, and you will see a lot more innovation from us on this. And this messaging, like chat, click, all of that, and the audio-visual tools will get deeply woven into all kinds of applications, from CRM or project management to HR software, accounting software. All these would have all these built-in collaborative. Because take accounting software, what does it have to do with audio-visual tools? Well, you may want to have a quick meeting with your auditor, your accountant, and they come on video, and you have a quick one right there in the context, and that gets attached as a transcript, an example. And these kinds of things are going to happen. So these collaboration tool, this remote work is going to be woven into everything. And so every app is really now a collaboration app. And that's what you're going to see. And you can see this in our backstage, the Q&A, the chat, all this is powered from our Click platform, really. And that's how our backstage events platform got all those features for free, because we are already built it. We just enabled it through API into the software. But having said all this, and as a technologist, I'm going to say that tech is the easy part. And there's a lot more complex is how to manage this highly distributed company, and particularly the cultural roots. For this, I'm going to actually say the key here is nurturing the culture with a sense of it, sharing shared values, shared purpose, and shared experiences. And that's a very hard problem. And I actually I'm very non-traditional in this, and I look for inspiration from far and wide. And I, for example, ask a question: how does a Mormon church create that shared purpose and values in its distributed flock, right? There is a lesson to learn for companies, organizations, and that's something that I pay a lot of attention to. And there are similar things around. So this is something worth studying. How do they do it? What's the secret? And last year I introduced this phrase. Actually, this was done in the last Analyst Day in January 2020, which now looks like another age altogether. We met in Austin, and it was a lot of fun. And this transnational localism is a phrase I had introduced then. And I'll talk about this briefly because it requires some explanation. And First, look at globalization, which is, I look at transnational localism as the alternative to the globalization that we have gone through. So even today, our economies run with you have a Chicago customer problem is solved from Chennai, and that is considered just normal now, right? Well, increasingly, Chicago customers want a local, presence, local this thing, and Chennai has got its own problems. So maybe we should solve those problems rather than worrying about Chicago's problems from Chennai. And so there is going to be all these forces, and I mentioned the geopolitical aspect of it, the self-reliance, all of that. So the short summary of that is the model of globalization we have had for the last 25 years necessarily will change. And this transnational localism is a different vision, and that's the local capability and resilience. That's the important stress. And here, localism for me is about being rooted. Focus on local jobs, particularly rural jobs, even more than just local jobs, rural jobs, living and nicely done inside. And it costs us comparatively very little compared to a San Francisco or New York. And our employees also have very high quality of life here. And why rural? And that just said it, cost of living closer to nature and open space, and having some space now is a good thing, right? Particularly this I've been saying for a while, but now with the pandemic, we are all about social distancing now, right? So what's the best way to achieve social distancing? Live in a rural area. So, and this mandates a hub and spoke office architecture, where actually even this office is a kind of a centralized hub for the local region. And we now have about 3 or 4 offices in very small, tiny villages, including the one where I live. I live about 22 kilometers, which is about 13, 14 miles from this office. And it's a tiny village. And so I don't come every day here, actually, even though our offices are now open. So I have assembled a small group to work closely with me there in that village. And then I come in when I need it. Like today, I've said I'll much rather take advantage of the much more resilient broadband we have here. So that is the hub and spoke offices. People will meet in a central place once in a while, but they will work out of small centers. And this we have gone at it with full engines. Roger mentioned it. About 15 plus offices in the past 6 months, including 2 in Texas in rural small areas, small towns, within the past 3-4 months. And we are spreading ourselves out all over. Within the next year, I think we will have about 100 small offices like that around the world. And this clearly will support local economies, and we will strike local partnerships. We are already discussing this, actually. And in each of these areas, we partner with local organizations to be of use locally, to be helpful locally. And this is actually the theme I talked about last year, cloud-enabled rural revival. And I'm happy to say that things have progressed quite a bit in the last year since I spoke. And of course, I moved myself in September 2019 here. And now I put down roots, and the pandemic is effectively over, I mentioned. And today it feels a lot more like I'm completely at home and become local now. And that also comes with a little share of this thing, because people recognize me around this area because I've gone on TV and all of that. And that poses a little bit of a challenge, because I go to a local temple and people want selfies now. So that's a little bit of a challenge. But otherwise, I've gone native here. And I work in deep technology, some of compilers and these semiconductor type of technologies. Also started a rural school. And the video I was talking to you from that school, which is in my village, and I also participate in civic affairs. And everybody from political leaders, all of them pay a visit, and we talk about local politics, local all that. So Along with it, as I say, I run this company too now. That's that's how I should say it now. So it's been an interesting life, interesting journey in the last year and a half, and we are putting down roots now. The school is now spread itself to 3 more locations, all just now seeded and maybe 30 kids or 20 kids each, but expanding rapidly. We are hiring teachers, all of that now. So that's what is going on. And I'm going to say this has been the biggest romantic adventure of my life. There's nothing else I've done comes close to this in terms of the sheer, just the fun I've had in this. So I wouldn't want it to be any other way. The whole point of living to me is to be able to do these kinds of adventures. And that starting the school was accidental. I wasn't intending it. I didn't even mention it last year that I will start a school, but here we are, and now I'm surrounded by kids. Actually, I spend about half an hour every day with these kids in the school, and I don't personally teach very much anymore because but I tell them stories, and sometimes we go on trips, all that. So this is part of my life where you can see me in this kind of they call it auto for auto rickshaw in India. I have one and I ride this. This has cost me about not little more than $2,000. It's an electric one, suitably. It's a battery powered one, and it goes about 18-20 miles an hour, which is good for these local mud roads and all that. You see the fields there, rice paddies and all that. So this is where I am right now. This was taken about a couple of days ago. And this particular slide was added just 10-15 minutes ago, by the way, which tells you how these technologies have worked. And this is just the last slide that got in, and only 10 minutes ago, just before I got on this presentation, before that. So, which is how, technology, all these come together. You can see all these trends coming together. This is an electric vehicle, by the way. And this is not a Tesla. This only cost $2,000, but I love it. So with this, I'm going to finish my presentation. Thank you. And
this is a section that we do every year. The idea is to communicate to the analyst community the state of our business, how we've performed over the previous year, and also to give you a sense of what's happened in the run-up over the last several years. Many of you have attended these sessions before, and some of you have not. So I'd like to give you a sense of what we will actually do. All of you know by now that we are a private company. And so one of the things we do is we do not share a lot of specific detailed financial information on the company. This is specifically to do with stuff like profitability information, revenue, and so on. However, we've pulled together a bunch of information that could give you a good sense of how our business has been doing over time. So I hope you find this useful. And if you have any questions, we'll take them at the end. Before I get started, I'd like to provide an overview of the company. Many of you know us, but I want to create this one snapshot of everything to do with the scope of the company and what we do. So if I'm the first one telling you today that we've been around for 25 years, we haven't done our work well so far, but we've been here for a quarter of a century. We have over 9,000 employees worldwide. Our products are sold in almost all over the globe, almost any country you can think of. What's specific and special to Zoho is that we've been bootstrapped and have been profitable from day one. That's very much part of the DNA of this company. We announced last year that we had hit 60 million users. These are both paid and free users of our products, as opposed to companies and corporations. So these are end users of our products all over the globe. We've added apps every year, and those of you who have been with us for several years will know that that's what we diligently do. We keep building applications and keep enriching our platforms. So we've got more than 50 apps today. If I were to put in a nutshell what we do, we're privately held, but we see ourselves as publicly responsible. Before I go into the numbers, I want to acknowledge something about how last year turned out for us and the extraordinary events of the year that resulted in extraordinary measures that we had to take for our own business. The first thing we had to do when the pandemic hit last year was to start to take care of our own. And that means our employees first, our customers, and the community in which we live. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit of how this happened and how this unfolded last year. So with our employees, the first thing we did was we recognized that we needed to work from home before any lockdown happened in any country. So around this time last year, in February, we told people they should work from home. That gave people the latitude and the recognition that the company put their health first. It also gave us about 2 or 3 week head start in planning for this. How do we support in terms of equipment, in terms of devices, in terms of bandwidth? How do we still manage to support a customer in Latvia from somebody's rural home in Tamil Nadu in India? So these are the things we had to iron out, and we were glad we took that time and acted early. One of the things Sridhar did within the first week, very early, was to immediately announce that there would be no layoffs at all. The idea was this was announced even before we knew the size of the hole that we might get into. And the idea here was very clear. And in his mind, it was the company has been profitable, it's built reserves over time, and this is the reason why we build our reserves. And this is the time, if we have to dig into them, this is the time we have to do it. So this was a bold statement he made. And I think all of us in the company truly appreciated how immediately that was done. We also laid out a plan on what would happen should things go downhill, and should we have to make cuts, how would the pay cuts happen? It would start at the top with executives like myself and then work all the way down. And the last people to be impacted would be the people who are the newest to the company and in the most junior roles. I'm very thankful to say that much like other technology companies, we didn't have to do any of this stuff. In fact, at the end of the year, we also managed to do our annual raises for our employees. So I'm very grateful for that. And we do deeply recognize that not all companies, not all industries had this luxury last year. So once we took care of our employees, we had to look at our customers. As you know, many of our customers are small, medium businesses. And the first thing we had to do was to ensure their continuity in any which way we could. So we put aside a program called ESAP, which was basically a waiver of subscriptions with us. So all we did is set up a website, customer registers, no questions asked. All we do is verify they're a customer and they get to go for free. We even extended this once the period lapsed. We realize that many customers need communications now. Work from home is the paradigm, and so they might be lacking technology. So we put together something quickly with all the components we already have, called it Remotely, and it's a suite of communication collaboration tools, launched it on a free basis. It's still available today. We also decided to take some of our customers in the area of education, put together Zoho Classes, which was an education tool to provide distance learning. And then we extended it beyond our customers to any school, and with on a free basis up to a certain number. As the pandemic continued to advance and we saw that people started to come back into the office, we put in place a creator workplace tool that would allow people to come back, institute new processes, put in checks and measures on the kinds of things that allow companies, especially at the forefront on the retail side, particularly to have capabilities to make sure their workplace was safe. These were some of the things we did, many more, and you can see them in the URL at the bottom of the page. The next extension of what we had to do is what happens to the community. We started again with that immediate circle, our partners, people who work with us. Many of our partners are also small businesses. They fit in that middle category. So we extended the same capabilities for them so they could take advantage of things. We continued to pay commissions even though some of our products were going free, so partners don't suffer from cash flow. We also decided that this would be a great time for people to actually learn the products. So we instituted, for our partners, training sessions. There were marathon sessions day and night for across all geographic domains to take this opportunity so people can invest in the time they had to learn the product and go deeper into the technology. As many of you know, we have large facilities in Chennai that can serve literally tens of thousands of meals a day. So we opened up those facilities to our neighboring community so we could bring food. And this was in the times when a lot of things were uncertain. Many of the establishments were shut. This was something we could do, and we put that in place. We also looked at centers that were set up to address COVID and offered our software like ZohoDesk, which is our help center, which is our help desk software, to allow these centers to work with customers, manage the traffic that they need to do, and use some of the best practices we had. Above all, what this thing did for us, it accelerated this trend that you've heard from Sridhar yesterday, the notion of transnational localism. This actually accelerated that trend. We started to go more deeper. We could experience this faster. As you heard yesterday, we invested in many more rural offices, not just in India and in other parts of the world. So that was the outcome of last year. So I'm going to switch to some of the numbers. Considering the year and considering what the world went through, we did pretty well. I'm very thankful for that, and we will never take that for granted. So let me discuss how we performed. If you look at any SaaS business, any business that grows with a recurring revenue, you look at its core business drivers and you see how that did over time. So on the left, we start with registrations. So these are customers, these are not yet customers, people who sample our products. They come to a website, they register for the product, they try it out. Maybe it's a free basis or a trial basis or even a paid basis. These registrations then turn into paying customers, the source of our revenue, which is the third box, right? So that's revenue over time. And ultimately, how well do we preserve that revenue? How well do we preserve and serve those customers gets to the factor of retention. So I'm going to keep this simple and just have a slide in each one of these so you can see how we've done over time and last year. Registrations. So last year, at the end of last year, December 31st, we had 62 million users registered on Zoho platforms. This includes all our products. It includes free as well as paid users. On the top left, you can see the performance over time. So over the last 5 years, this number has been growing at an annualized rate about 28%. Last year, it dipped a little bit, 22%. And we expect that it will pick up again. It's also because we also reduced some of our marketing spend last year in anticipation of preserving our cash flow and using it and redirecting it to other purposes. So that's registrations. Pretty good for a rather dismal year. And retention, as you know, is the inverse of churn. So you see, that's what you see in this graph here is our churn numbers. So this is a monthly churn rate, and you can see how it's been going down over the years. So we've hit about a little under 3% now, and that's probably the lowest we'll get because there is a natural rate of churn, just like there is a natural rate of unemployment, because there are companies that go out of business. And we're lucky that last year we did pretty well, despite the fact that a lot of small companies were unevenly impacted by the pandemic, and many of them couldn't stay in business. So some of the churn we managed to rest because we did better with larger customers. Some of it is because we extended our ability to keep those customers alive and running for longer periods of time until they could get back on the saddle. So this is, again, average across all of Zoho products. You'll see some products do significantly better than this, and some others less so, based on how people tend to use them. So the inverse of this is to look at, on the x-axis here, you have LTV that tells you the lifetime of the customer, which is of the order of 35 months today on average. Okay, so that gives you the overview of our numbers. I'm going to talk a little bit about our approach to growth. Zoho, as many of you know, grows organically. We don't make any acquisitions. And that is tied in to some of the things we heard yesterday too. We are deeply integrated or vertically integrated. Sridhar talked yesterday about delayering the stack. And when you start to bring in that value up and down the stack, and within a single layer in the stack, in the application layer, you want things to work tightly together. You want to have one layer be able to take advantage of technologies and capabilities built in the layer below it, and also know what is going to be implemented in those other layers so you can plan for it ahead of time. That creates a much better customer experience and allows us to put things in front of the customer that look like they came out of a single box. Apple is a company that does this really well, and you can see how they follow this strategy